Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host, Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. Good to be back for another episode. And this week, we're talking about the chemistry conversation, how to structure the chemistry conversation so that you're setting your coaching up for success. And the reason why we're talking about this today is because it's actually a really important part of the coaching. In this podcast, we talk a lot about what happens in a session, but actually, before you get started coaching, there's a lot you need to think about and consider and work through with prospective clients, be that internal in terms of your internal matching processes, or if you're an external independent coach looking at the clients that you want to work with. There's lots of different things to check off. So we're going to be talking about some of that today. So where should we kick off?
I think it's good to have a semi-structure for the conversation and to be able to align with your potential coachee on how much time you've got for the conversation and what you're going to cover. Like, what does success look like at the end of that chemistry conversation?
Thinking actually there about time, we do get asked, don't we, how long should a chemistry conversation be? And I think as a guide, 20 minutes to half an hour is a great amount of time for a chemistry conversation. Any more than that, you're probably coaching already. The purpose of the chemistry conversation, if we start there, is really about matching. It's about understanding, do you and your client have a good chemistry match? And also, is your client in a place where they're ready, willing, and able to experience coaching? And there's different facets to that. One might be, are they clear on what coaching is and what coaching isn't? Is the topic that they're bringing to coaching that they want to be coached on actually coaching appropriate? Is coaching actually the best support for that client in that moment? And I guess all of these kind of pieces are working towards, is your client coachable? So actually, are they coming with an open mind? Are they interested to learn? Is there any resistance to the coaching? And obviously, is that client somebody that you feel you can support and want to help in their journey of growth?
There's a lot in there, Zoe, isn't there, to be able to start with. So you're going to be sharing something with your coachee about you, who you are, what your coaching style is, what they can expect from you as the coach, because you'll have some coachees that have never had coaching before. So you do need to explain to them what coaching is and your interpretation of coaching. You also want to inquire with them, what's their understanding of coaching? Then you move on to talk about your style of coaching, and you can then ask them as well, what do they need from you as a coach? So you start to explore, how could we work together effectively?
It's a balance, isn't it? I think that how much of yourself do you share in the chemistry conversation? Obviously, once you get into coaching, you aren't there to share about yourself. You aren't there in a coaching relationship sharing your, oh, me too. Yes, I've got children too, or I don't have children, so I relate to what's happening. You're not there to share your experience once you're inside the coaching relationship. But I think when you're looking for, as a client, when I come to coaching and I'm looking for a match, I do want to know a little bit about who it is that I'm working with, like who is the human behind the face that is coaching. And because a lot of chemistry isn't really just about knowledge and expertise, it's about, do I want to spend time with this person? Do I feel like I can open up? And so I think there is a balance between sharing enough about who you are beyond coaching, but not too much that you're there pushing the agenda of like, see, I understand who you are. It's really a light touch in terms of, beyond coaching, this is who I am and this is how I experience the world.
And then you've obviously got practicalities. Once you've established that there is an alignment, you would like to work together, you think there is a match around skills and personalities and all of those factors, it's a case of establishing, how often does the person want coaching? How long will the sessions be? What will you do if the coachee needs to cancel a session? What flexibility will you offer or not? Who's going to set up the coaching invites? If you're doing it virtually, who's going to send those invites? If you're meeting up, where are you going to meet up? So talking through some of those so that the potential coachee can understand then, do the practical arrangements work for me? So for example, if the coach can only coach you on a Friday, but you don't have capacity to be coached on a Friday, even if there is a personality match, it may be that the practical elements don't. And so you would need to look for another coach.
Yeah, and some of that can be presumptive, can't it, in terms of assuming that the coaching is going to go forward. And so I do think there's an element of judgment that you bring to the coaching conversations around the timing of those particular aspects of the conversation. I think you'd definitely be asking open questions around, what is it you'd like to bring to coaching? And exploring that in some depth, not so much the struggle, although that's interesting, but what does the client actually want to get out of coaching? What would success look like to that client? How do they measure success? And particularly if somebody is investing in this themselves, what would the return on investment be for them? What would they need to achieve for this to be an easy decision for them to invest in coaching? And I think helping clients to see the value in their investment, even if you're an internal coach, is still an investment of time. What would that look like, and helping and supporting to build that out and work through that journey, and also understanding some of the barriers. So if that's what you want to achieve, what's getting in your way, because that's where you're going to be able to assess if that is something that you feel that you can coach, and something that you feel you can support with.
And there's a delicate balancing act for you to do as a coach, because if you have a potential coachee who is a great storyteller and feels the need for you to understand them, they feel you need to understand everything about them, that isn't going to fit into 20 minutes. So you need to have an approach to be able to manage the time in that conversation so that you can bottom line really, or help the coachee to bottom line exactly what it is that they are coming to coaching for. And as Zoe said, what the value is that they're looking for the coaching, and how they would know that that has been successful.
And as well as practical, which we touched on earlier, obviously one of the things that will come up in the chemistry conversation, particularly if you're an independent coach, is price, investment, fees. And we get a lot of questions about this, don't we? How do you handle pricing discussions? Should I put my prices on my website? Should I not? And that is a personal decision, I think, that all independent coaches make. But for us, and certainly for me, putting my prices on my website is an easy one for me, because then when clients come to the chemistry conversation, they're coming with an awareness. So if somebody is approaching me and asking me for coaching, I will often tell them the investment up front and send them to my website to have a look. And that is both personal, because I am energy led. So when I'm in a conversation with somebody, in a chemistry conversation, I don't want to have to interrupt that by talking about the pricing. It becomes an easier part of the flow if the prices are transparent and the client is able to see what the investment is up front. Now, the counter argument to that is, but if the client should be able to speak to me so they can really understand the value of the investment. And I can see both sides, but I think for me in that chemistry conversation, it's about fit. It's about helping the client to clarify what they want. And it's about trusting in their resourcefulness and wisdom to be able to make the decision for themselves about whether that investment is right for them. And you try to write my website to build enough curiosity in my client that they are willing and ready to take the next step to see then if we're a good fit.
Yeah. And remember, there's choice. The whole purpose of the chemistry conversation is that the coach and the coachee are at choice. And part of this is about how are both parties going to make a decision about whether or not to proceed with the coaching, and therefore what are the natural next steps. So are you going to leave it that the coachee contacts you to let you know the decision, or are you going to say, I will follow up with you tomorrow or in a couple of days to see if you have made a decision? Are you going to send them some additional information or some resource following on from the conversation today? So there's lots of other things that you could do, but how are you going to bring that conversation to a close, ensuring that the coachee has had the opportunity to be able to have all of their questions answered? And it's great to be able to capture the questions in the beginning, because it helps you to plan out the time that you've got. I know with some I always kind of offer them, would you like to tell me a bit about you first, or would you like me to tell you a bit about me and what coaching is first? I always offer them that because some people are quite nervous about having a conversation. They don't know how to be in a chemistry conversation. And so they want me to go first, and then they get that sense of who I am and how I am. And other people have almost so pent up that they've got all this stuff they want to work on, that once they get into the chemistry conversation, they really want to share it. And they feel that, they don't want to hear anything from me until they've had the opportunity to explain to me what it is that's brought them to this chemistry conversation.
And they may not need to either. I think that's the other thing. So for many people who are engaging in coaching, particularly independent coaches, they've probably been following you for a while, be it on social media or in other ways that they've come into contact with you. They might have had a browse around your website, read your about page. So I think that invitation is important. Like, do you want me to tell you anything about me? Do you want to talk about yourself first? Because after they've had the opportunity to talk about themselves, the way that you listen, the way that you hold space, the energy that you create might actually be enough for that client to feel like this is a good match for them. They may not want to know about you and your life. In fact, so whilst we said it's important to share some of yourself to balance out the relationship, actually sometimes your client may not need that. And it's back to that judgment again, isn't it? As a coach, kind of judging what is best in that moment. There was something else you said before around kind of ending those chemistry conversations, and it reminded me that we had a question come up in our membership, actually in our Coaching Crowd Business Lounge membership, about somebody who'd had a chemistry conversation and said, like, go and speak to some coaches, before you make your final decision. And then there was a moment of, oh gosh, was that stupid, or was that the right thing to do? And I think some coaches do take that approach, don't they, of saying, look, match is so important for the effectiveness of the relationship, but actually it's great that you've spoken to me. I'd also recommend you go and speak to one or two more so you can get a real understanding of what you're looking for. It's not something I personally do. I sort of put faith in the client to make the decision that's right for them, but I know coaches that do, and I think that's a great approach as well. So again, there's no right or wrong, is there, in terms of how you choose to run your business and your chemistry conversations, but there's some things to consider that can be helpful around us, really making sure that when your client engages with you, they're all in and they're totally ready to go.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between that potential coachee saying to you, oh, I've got a couple of other coaches that I'm going to speak to, and you responding and saying, well, I don't think you need to speak to anybody else. Like, either you're ready to engage in the coaching or you're not. That's totally different, and we definitely wouldn't advocate that. Versus if the client is saying, I would really like to start coaching with you if you're happy to coach me, and you being happy, you're checking in yourself. How do I feel about this relationship and this conversation? Do I want to engage with this client for all of the right ethical reasons, and then being happy without feeling the need to say, no, you need to go and speak to some other people before I will accept you as a coachee. So, but yeah, it's about ethics and integrity and that relationship with the client and how you choose to work. A really big thing we haven't yet talked about is confidentiality. And part of the chemistry conversation is talking about the boundaries of confidentiality, and that will vary to an extent. So if you're an external coach and the client is paying privately out of their own pocket, that conversation is confidential. However, you might take that client as an anonymous client to your supervision to discuss an aspect of it, but you won't reveal their name or any identifying characteristics of your coachee that would enable a supervisor to know who they are. And if they disclose something that led you to believe that they're a risk of harm to themselves or others, then that would be a reason why you might break confidentiality. And if possible, you would discuss, if helpful, you would discuss it with your client if able to at that point. But there may be situations where you wouldn't. If you are working with as an external coach in an organization, there may be a sponsor involved, and you might have what's called a four-way contract, where you might have HR that's maybe commissioning or sponsoring the coaching, the line manager of the person that you're coaching, the person you're coaching, and yourself. You need to agree the boundaries and the lines of of confidentiality. You might be an internal coach, and the people that are coming to you that have the opportunity to be coached by you might be concerned about you knowing who their boss is, and will you be sharing information with them or with the board of directors? Like, what are the limits there? That's a very sensitive topic when you're coaching internally. And what about the information that you might have where there could be a perceived conflict of interest? If, for example, you knew there was going to be reorganization in the company, and that person that you might be coaching, their role might be put at risk of redundancy. Those are some of the extra things that you would need to get clarity on, really, in that chemistry conversation, so that the coachee and the coach can make an informed decision about whether it is ethical and useful to work together.
Yeah, and that's confidentiality, it's ethics, it's conflict of interest, and ultimately it's about trust. It's about the essence of being able to wholly trust your coach, because if you haven't got whole trust, it's very hard to do effective coaching. And I think that piece around kind of confidentiality and ethics, that is something, again, that you will broaden your experience of with the more coaching that you do, and the different kinds of coaching that you do. You'll come across different challenges, and I think as coaches, we've been in the industry now for over 10 years. We still have those questions around, what would I do in this situation? Or I am in this situation, what do I do now? So making sure that you're equipped, it's not just in the coaching, but also with these chemistry conversations, equipped with supervision or a peer network where you can go and have those conversations to reassure yourself. So yeah, confidentiality is a big part of the chemistry conversation. And really what you're doing, in essence, is just setting the scene for effective coaching to take place. It's about rapport building, establishing trust and confidence in your client, and helping your client to feel at ease. So they're big parts of what is happening in the chemistry conversation.
Yeah, and how does the potential coachee want you to be as their coach if they get stuck? How much challenge versus how much support do they want from you as the coach in the coaching relationship? Do they want to have notes of the coaching sessions or not? And if so, what format? Also, a big one that comes up is about whether or not you send those notes, if you do send notes, to their work email address. And if so, what does it need to be headed up? Does it need to say confidential on it? Because do other people have access to their email? Does it go to a personal email? It's good to get those practicalities out of the way, so that when you're together again, if you decide to start that coaching relationship, you are starting session one with all of that kind of sorted. You might recontract at the start of that conversation, but that's really more of a reminder and a check that that is still the case. And then it holds the rest of that space for you to be able to really begin coaching.
And there may be some things that your client doesn't have the answer to, so questions that we asked around, how often do you want coaching? Do you want notes of your coach? Your client may not know. They might say, well, I don't know, like, what would you recommend? And so I think this is a space in the chemistry conversation where your relationship is co-created, where your client will be looking to you to help to steer that ship a little bit. And you do need to be mindful not to create a power imbalance, and make sure that you take your client's needs into consideration there. But that's sometimes why coaching packages can be really helpful, because there is a standard. This is what I offer. It's 6 sessions of coaching for X amount over X amount of time. That can make those decisions easier for the client as well as for you, rather than having to, tailor and bespoke, the container of your coaching each time you have a chemistry conversation.
And part of the measure of this is like, how much fun do you have together in that chemistry conversation? How open and in flow are you able to be, and is your coachee able to be? And what will you do if you don't really feel that connection to your coachee, but the potential coachee is like, yep, I'd really like to work with you?
And that's one thing we haven't talked about, but we get asked is, what if I don't want to go ahead? What if I don't want to coach this person? How do I handle that as a conversation? Excuse me. And I don't think that's easy. I would say I don't think it happens very often. So I don't think it's very often that you would come across, or if I speak personally, it's not very often I've come across somebody where I haven't wanted to coach them. There's definitely times I've come across clients where I'm like, oh, that feels edgy. I'm not sure how I feel about this client, but for me, that is often a clue of like, so this could be really interesting work. I wonder what that's about, rather than I don't like this client, I can't coach them. I rarely, if ever, have gone there. The one time I have turned down a client relationship is because the client wanted to work specifically on anger, which again, in itself isn't a problem. But when this particular client was talking about the anger, I just had an intuition that this wasn't a place that I wanted to go. And so I chose to trust that intuition. And I think often that is where we go when we make decisions about whether we want to work with a client or not. It's trusting our gut instincts and our feelings, really, about the energy that those chemistry conversations create. And of course, if then you decide not to move forward, what's your process? So for me, it would be referring to other people who I thought might be right or not, or it's simply saying, I don't think we're, I would be the best coach for you right now. However, I wish you luck in your search for somebody more suitable. You have to kind of cross those bridges when you come to them, I think, but it can be helpful to have a network to refer into, so the client doesn't feel like you're abandoning them.
I love chemistry conversations. I just think I get excited about the possibility of a new relationship with a new person and all the potential that's wrapped up in that relationship, and what we'll both learn as a result of being involved in that. So I think with chemistry conversations, for them to be effective, it's also about thinking about how do you prepare yourself for them? Like, before you jump in and all of a sudden you're there together and you're facilitating this conversation, what is your mindset before you go into that? What is the emotional state, that you're in? How are you entering into that relationship? Because people often remember those very first moments, don't they, of kind of making contact with another person. So smiling, great eye contact, like all of those things are really important and part of the consideration for how you begin your relationship with the other person. And even if the coachee decides you're not the right coach, it'd be great if they're able to talk about you to other people and say, I spoke to this really interesting coach the other day or the other month when I was looking for a coach. They weren't the right coach for me because of X reason, but I think they'd be a great fit for you. Here's their contact details. That's also a great outcome from the conversation as well.
So lots of things to think about in terms of chemistry conversations. And I think, to summarize, building on what Jo said there, it's like, actually, how do you want to leave your client feeling in a chemistry conversation? Because that is ultimately how clients make their choices around who they want to work with, is based on how do they feel in the company that they've experienced at that moment. So lots to reflect on. As we said, a semi-structure for a coaching chemistry conversation could be really helpful. There's a lot to cover. 20 minutes doesn't sound like long, does it, when we kind of go through all of that? But of course, whatever you don't get to cover in that initial session, you can continue into the first coaching session if the client chooses to go ahead with you. So have fun with those chemistry conversations and wish you all the luck with them.
And remember that what you've just listened to is about 20 minutes, which is the same length as we're recommending for your coaching chemistry conversations. And if you're enjoying our podcast, you might also want to check out our YouTube channel, which is In Good Company with Jo Wheatley and Zoe Hawkins, where we've got a whole backlog of coaching demos on top of videos of these podcasts. So come and find us over there. See what resources might also help you to learn more about coaching. And of course, if you find them useful and you want to recommend them to others, that would be great. And, please subscribe and keep up to date with the latest episodes.